So I've set the more or less ambitious goal to create a data ingestion pipeline for IoT projects in 10 minutes. And this is somewhat ambitious, so I'll try to talk as slowly as possible while keeping within the assigned 10 minutes. The first thing I'll do is I'll create some Azure resources, and I'll show you what I'll create in a moment. But since I said from 0 to data ingestion, I'll have to start from 0. So let me first create a new Azure resource group, and then deploy some resources into that resource group. And that will take some time. And while this is running, I'll talk a bit about the details. So the first thing I would like to talk about is what resources we'll be deploying. And let me start here. So if you start building data ingestion processes for IoT data in Azure, what you'll most likely do, what is like a reference architecture, what you could use as reference architecture, you have an IoT app that your devices connect to. They send data on. You use Azure Stream Analytics to take that data, group it, divide it, send it to databases, to event hubs, to Power BI, to whatever you want to send it to, and also to storage accounts where you want. Typically, what you want to do is you want to store all the raw data that's coming in so that you can reprocess it at a later point if you need that, or that you have a log of the raw data, of the unprocessed data, in case you want to change some processing logic. The problem that I have with this approach is it's really nice, it scales really well. The problem that I have is that in Stream Analytics, you're somewhat limited to what you can do with your data. It's become better. There's more in there now. So there's more you can do in Stream Analytics now than there was a year or two ago. But for example, if you take the connection to the storage account, Stream Analytics will always create directories by date and then store the data for all devices in files that are created in time batches. So you'll have the data for all devices in one file all the time, which can be okay if you want to work with data from the entire day anyway, from all devices. But if you want to work with data from only one device, you'll have to open all files to get and read all data from your storage account to just get the data from one device, which can be really annoying. So to have a bigger flexibility here and to also have the possibility to enrich your data in more ways than Stream Analytics offers, I propose a different architecture. So what I like to do is I like to have an Azure function here in between. And the Azure function is on a serverless tier, meaning it scales well. I don't need to take care of scaling it with a number of incoming messages, but all this is done for me. And I'll show how to implement that. What I'll show is this part down here with the storage account connection. And the data for this presentation, the demo data and everything, I'll of course send to Ben and the Data Minutes team, and I'll also upload to my own GitHub page so that everybody can use that as a starting point if you ever have to work with streaming data. So let's go back to the demo and have a look at what we're creating. The bicep file is not very surprising. What we're creating, and I'll have to rush through this, is an IoT hub, a storage account, blob service for the storage account, App Insights to monitor our function. We won't use that now, but just for the completeness. And then our function with a hosting plan that's on a dynamic tier, which means it's on a serverless tier, it will scale automatically, and our function app itself. Okay, now if we want to create a new function, then the way to do that in Visual Studio is you say create new function project, and we'll create a new folder for that, and create a function in that folder. I get to choose my language. Sorry, Ben, I know you don't like that choice, but C# is good. I'll choose .NET Core 3. I'll choose an IoT.
I think your time is just up. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. I hadn't prepared more, so I was hoping to get out of it. No. So I have an IoT hub trigger. So I choose a trigger. Then I say, okay, what is my function call? Where is it located? I select a setting. I'll just go over this briefly because I've prepared some new stuff, some other stuff. I choose the endpoint where I want to receive my data. The messages endpoint is just the default endpoint for Azure Functions. Override the following tasks. Yeah, override, I don't care. I will end up with an empty function, and you can see that it's fairly easy because a function is just some code where you have a run method that is called by an IoT Hub trigger. You get to enter your connection string here, and you get the message as event data, and you can work with that message in that function. So writing code live is not a good idea. Writing code in 10 minutes live is an even worse idea. So I've prepared something here. And I've prepared a function, and I'll go through that briefly with you. I've changed the signature of my function to be asynchronous because I'll do some asynchronous calls. Stuff that you'll see here is, for example, the connection string comes from an environment setting, meaning I can have it in a key vault at a later point. Same goes for the credentials of the storage account, and I want the container in my storage account to also be variable. What happens in my code is I create a blob client, I get a reference to the container that I want, and if that doesn't exist, then I create the container. So far, so good. So this is really fast. I'm aware of that, but you can replay it later at half speed. Next thing I do is I take the message body from the message that I received from the Event Hub, and I deserialize that. This has the assumption that this is a JSON object that I'm sent, which is typically holds true. I get the name of the device from the message. I create in my storage account folders from year, month, and day, and then I choose the device name as file name that I want to write into. Then I create a reference to that file, to that blob file. If it doesn't exist, I create it, and then I have an append task where I just append the message, that I received, and write that to the file, and that's basically all I need to do. So you can see it's like 70 lines of code, 80 lines of code to have the entire ingestion and write into an arbitrary structure in my storage account. Now, if I want to go ahead and deploy that, this is fairly easy. My deployment has already succeeded. So now I can, in the next step, I can go ahead and deploy that function. So I zoom out so that I get the Azure logo. I choose the Azure logo, and then I get to deploy that to a function that I have created, and it will be called minutes, and it will be that one because that's the one I just created. And then I just click deploy, and I choose the function here. I'm asked to confirm whether I want to deploy, and I publish. And once I've done that, I can start sending data to my IoT Hub. For that, I need to go to the portal, into my resource group that I've just created, and to my Event Hub, into my IoT Hub, and create a device here. Get the connection string for that device. So I'll add it. I've done that before on the demo, so I won't go through all the steps. But what I would do is I create a device, and I get the connection string from the device, because that's how I connect to the IoT Hub and send data. And the data received from my function is from the built-in Event Hub compatible endpoint. So I copied that connection string into the setting for my function. And what I can do next is that I have written a small script here that simulates the device and writes data to my pre-existing connection, to my pre-existing event IoT Hub that I've created yesterday when developing. And what this does, it just continuously sends random values in a JSON string to my IoT hub. So I go to my PowerShell, I run the simulated device. No, I don't. I get an error because I used the wrong connection string, I guess. That's what happens when you type in demos. But that keeps it interesting. So I can send data to my IoT hub, and then in the cloud, I can see the deployment I did yesterday, which is in the DataMins dev at the moment. And I can have a look at the storage account and see that my function works as designed. And I have my container here for the raw sensor data. And hopefully you can see that for the 21st, I have a file that is an append blob, and that was written into, and that will contain the data that I'm just sending out. And so with that, we have created the entire ingestion process that you can see here in just about 10 minutes, of course, with a lot of copy and paste and pre-written code. But writing it yourself from scratch, if you don't know the whereabouts, will take took about half an hour or something like that. And the interesting thing is, and that's the point where you would start to work with the Azure Functions framework, to have things like durable entities that enable you to store a state of certain devices, of certain messages, so you can work with state in serverless functions, which is a nice concept, and that enables you to calculate averages on the fly and stuff within this Azure function. So this is a rather flexible and scalable architecture that is easy to set up and work with.